Elon Musk is humiliated and kicked out of an elite golf club because of a MAGA cap, but his response shocked everyone. What did he do? Subscribe, give it a like, and write in the comments where you're watching from. The early morning sunlight bathed the sleek surface of the Tesla Cybertruck as it pulled into the private driveway leading to the Gateswood Golf and Country Club. The vehicle, a bold metallic anomaly among the polished black sedans and classic European sports cars in the parking lot, instantly drew the attention of the valet staff. They exchanged glances, unsure of how to approach the futuristic machine. Before they could make a move, the gull-wing door silently lifted, and out stepped Elon Musk. Casually dressed in a fitted black t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers, the centerpiece of his ensemble was an unmistakable red baseball cap, embroidered with bold white letters, "Make America Great Again." The cap, slightly frayed at the brim, sat snugly on his head, adding a provocative splash of color to his otherwise understated look. It was a gift from an old acquaintance, and though he didn't usually dabble in political fashion statements, today it felt fitting. After all, he was in the mood to shake things up. The Gateswood Golf and Country Club was not just any club. It was a fortress of exclusivity, known for its manicured fairways, colonial-style clubhouse, and a membership roster that included senators, tech moguls, and the occasional Hollywood A-lister. Its reputation for rigid tradition was as unyielding as the iron gates that now loomed ahead. Elon slowed his stride as he approached the entrance, taking in the sprawling landscape of the course. Rolling hills framed by tall cypress trees stretched out in every direction, while hints of sunlight glinted off the surface of a distant water hazard. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, with a faint undertone of cigar smoke drifting from the clubhouse veranda. A group of men in pastel polos and tailored slacks stood laughing near the first tee, their camaraderie interrupted by sideways glances at the new arrival. As he neared the gate, a tall, square-jawed security guard stepped forward, blocking the path. The man's uniform was crisp, his demeanor professional but guarded. His eyes briefly flicked to Elon's cap before settling on his face. "Good morning, sir. May I see your membership card?" the guard asked, his voice polite but firm. Elon offered a half-smile and gestured to himself. "Membership card? Come on, I think I left it on Mars." The guard's expression didn't waver. "Sir, all members and their guests are required to present their credentials at the entrance." "I'm not a member," Elon admitted, pulling off his sunglasses and sliding them into his shirt collar. "But I figured you'd make an exception." The guard raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "I'm afraid that's not how it works here. Club policy is very clear." Elon leaned in slightly, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "Listen, I'm Elon Musk. You know, the Tesla guy, SpaceX, Neuralink. I sort of assumed my reputation would precede me." The guard's face betrayed no recognition, but his lips twitched as if suppressing a smirk. "I'm aware of who you are, sir. Club policy still applies." For the first time, Elon's confident demeanor faltered. "You're kidding." The guard shook his head. "No, sir, I'm not. There's also a strict dress code, and I'm afraid your attire doesn't meet our standards. Specifically," he hesitated, glancing pointedly at the cap, "headwear with political slogans is prohibited." Elon laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "You're seriously rejecting me because of a hat?" "It's not personal, Mr. Musk. We have to maintain a certain atmosphere here." Elon straightened, the laughter fading from his face. The faint amusement in his eyes was replaced by a steely glint. Atmosphere. Right. Because that's what matters most in a game of golf. At that moment, A second figure emerged from the clubhouse, a thin, impeccably dressed man with a clipboard in hand. His gray suit was so tailored it seemed to mold itself to his frame. The faint sheen of perspiration on his brow suggested he had been watching the exchange from a distance. "Mr. Hillman, our club manager," the guard introduced, stepping back as the man approached. "Mr. Musk," Hillman began, his tone smooth but devoid of warmth. "It's an honor to have you here. I regret to inform you, however, that we must adhere to our policies, no matter how distinguished the guest. I trust you understand." Elon tilted his head, studying the manager as though he were an intriguing but ultimately irrelevant piece of machinery. "What I understand," he replied slowly, "is that you've built a bubble. A perfectly curated little world where the right shoes and the right slogans determine someone's worth." Hillman's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We believe in preserving tradition, Mr. Musk. It's what our members value." The conversation had begun to attract attention. A few nearby guests paused their conversations, their gazes shifting between Elon and the gate. The murmurs started softly, but they grew louder as recognition dawned among the onlookers. Elon caught snippets of their words. Is that really him? What's he wearing? Why would he come here? But he paid them no mind. His focus remained locked on Hillman. "I suppose tradition is a fine excuse for exclusion," Elon said. His voice was calm, but each word was razor-sharp. Hillman's polished mask faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. "You're welcome to apply for membership, of course. We'd be delighted to review your application." Elon's smile returned, but it was laced with an edge of defiance. "I think I'll pass." Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked back toward his Cybertruck. The security guard stepped aside, but Hillman's voice followed him. "Good day, Mr. Musk." Elon didn't respond. He slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and sat for a moment in silence. The engine hummed to life, and as he pulled away from the gates, the gears in his mind were already turning. He had entered Gateswood as an outsider. He would leave it as a man with a plan. The red cap remained firmly in place as the truck disappeared down the winding road. The smooth hum of the Cybertruck's engine faded into silence as Elon pulled into a quiet corner of a public parking lot a few miles from the Gateswood Golf and Country Club. He sat motionless, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other lightly tapping his knee. The audacity of the situation replayed in his mind like a slow-motion clip. The way the guard's eyes had flicked dismissively to his cap, the smug grin on the manager's face, the condescending tone of every word spoken to him. Elon had never been one to dwell on slights. His life was a carousel of challenges, most of them vastly more significant than a denied entry into a golf club. But this felt different. It wasn't just about the rules or the cap. It was the deliberate nature of their exclusion. It wasn't the first time he'd faced judgment for standing apart, but this was the first time it had felt so blatantly personal. He leaned back in his seat, staring out through the tinted windshield at a world that moved on, oblivious to his irritation. The early afternoon sun had risen higher, casting long shadows across the polished surface of the truck. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips as he thought about the absurdity of the situation. A golf club? Seriously? But the smirk faded quickly, replaced by a darker resolve. It wasn't just a golf club. It was a symbol of the very systems he had spent his career disrupting. Old institutions that clung to their traditions not because they were better, but because they were exclusive. It was about power, control, and the gatekeeping of privilege. And today, that system had chosen him as its latest victim. He reached for his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number of one of his closest confidants, a no-nonsense operations manager who had been with him since the early days of Tesla. "Clara," he said when she answered. "I need a quick rundown on Gateswood Golf and Country Club, who owns it, who's on the board, and how they handle PR." Clara didn't miss a beat. "Give me 20 minutes," she replied before hanging up. While he waited, Elon leaned forward and opened his laptop, which he always kept within arm's reach. He typed "Gateswood Golf and Country Club Controversies" into the search bar. As expected, nothing too scandalous came up. Just a few complaints from former members about rising fees and the occasional grumble about how difficult it was to secure a tee time. The club had built its reputation on being untouchable, both in its exclusivity and in its PR. But every fortress had its cracks. His thoughts were interrupted by the ping of his phone. Clara's report had arrived. As he scanned the document, a clearer picture began to form. The club was privately owned by an aging real estate tycoon named Gerald Whitmore, a man who had built his fortune on luxury developments and had an infamous distaste for anything that deviated from his narrow vision of refinement. The board of directors was a mix of wealthy investors and old money families, all fiercely protective of the club's traditions. Their PR strategy was equally predictable: deflect, dismiss, and maintain an aura of untouchability. Elon's fingers hovered over the keyboard, considering his next move. He could unleash a single tweet about his experience and watch the public backlash unfold. It would be easy, too easy, but something about that felt hollow. This wasn't just about making a statement. It was about taking action. If Gateswood represented the pinnacle of exclusivity, then he would create something to counter it. Not just a rebuttal, but a revolution. As the plan began to take shape in his mind, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. The message read, "We heard about your little visit. Stick to building rockets, Mr. Musk. Leave golf to the grown-ups." For a moment, he stared at the screen, a slow burn rising in his chest. The message was anonymous, but its origin was obvious. The smug arrogance practically dripped off the words. He typed a response, but then deleted it. Instead, he snapped a photo of the red cap on his passenger seat and posted it to Twitter with the caption, "Some people cling to the past, others build the future. Time for a new game." The tweet was live for less than a minute before the likes and comments began pouring in. His followers, always quick to rally around his provocations, took the bait immediately. Speculation ran wild. Was he building a new golf club, creating a line of sportswear, or was this just another of his cryptic musings? Elon didn't confirm or deny anything. Instead, he started making calls. By the end of the day, he had reached out to designers, engineers, and even a few former PGA professionals he had met over the years. The message was simple. "I'm building a golf club, not just any club, a revolution in golf, and I need the best." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elon sat back in his seat, the wheels of his plan fully in motion. Gateswood had thrown down the gauntlet, and he had no intention of letting it lie. This wasn't just about a hat or a snub. It was about proving that the old ways of doing things no longer held sway over the future. And if there was one thing Elon Musk knew how to do, it was build the future. The Gateswood incident didn't stay quiet for long. By the next morning, the tweet Elon had posted, a simple photograph of his red cap paired with his cryptic declaration, had gone viral. Social media exploded with reactions, and while many praised him for challenging the elitism of traditional golf culture, others criticized him for injecting politics into the mix. The cap, with its unmistakable political connotations, became a flashpoint for heated debates online. Headlines popped up everywhere. Elon Musk stirs controversy at elite golf club, MAGA hat sparks debate on class and privilege, and tech billionaires' feud with Gateswood goes public. Elon expected backlash. It was an inevitable byproduct of his outspokenness, but he underestimated the lengths to which Gateswood would go to defend its image. It started subtly. A polite but firm statement from Gerald Whitmore, the club's owner, appeared in a prominent business publication. While we respect Mr. Musk's contributions to technology and innovation, Gateswood Golf and Country Club maintains a strict dress code and behavioral standards to ensure a welcoming environment for all members. The statement was a masterstroke of veiled condescension. It didn't name the cap explicitly, but everyone knew what it referred to. It painted Elon not as a trailblazing visionary, but as a disruptor incapable of respecting tradition. Elon laughed when he read it. "Behavioral standards," he muttered to himself. "That's a good one." But the statement wasn't the end. Anonymous sources, likely staff or insiders at Gateswood, began leaking embellished accounts of his visit to the press. Stories surfaced that painted Elon as arrogant and disrespectful, claiming he had demanded special treatment and refused to follow the rules. Some articles even hinted at an altercation, though no such thing had occurred. One headline in particular caught his eye: "Entitlement on the green, when billionaires think they're above the rules." For a man who prided himself on challenging the status quo, the narrative stung. It wasn't just an attack on his character, it was an attempt to undermine everything he stood for. Gateswood wasn't content to let the story die. They wanted to bury him under it. Elon's team grew concerned. Clara, his operations manager, called him late that evening. "Elon, this is escalating fast. They're playing dirty. We should issue a formal response." But Elon wasn't interested in statements or denials. "Let them talk," he said. "The louder they get, the more obvious their desperation." Still, the pressure mounted. Investors began asking questions. Even employees within his companies expressed concern over the optics of the situation. To some, it seemed like a frivolous distraction. To others, it was a potentially damaging controversy. The red cap became a symbol not just of political division, but of Elon's defiance against a deeply entrenched system. And not everyone was comfortable with that. The breaking point came 3 days later, when Elon received a letter, not an email, but a physical letter delivered to his home. The envelope was embossed with the Gateswood logo, its edges crisp and expensive to the touch. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in the same tone of false politeness that Whitmore had used in his public statement. "Mr. Musk, it has come to our attention that your recent public commentary has caused unwarranted attention to our institution. While we appreciate your interest in Gateswood, we must remind you that our policies exist to preserve the dignity of our members and the integrity of our traditions. We kindly request that you cease further public discussion of this matter. Sincerely, Gerald Whitmore." Elon read the letter twice, then set it down on the desk in his study. For a moment, he stared at it, as if trying to decide whether to laugh or throw it into the fireplace. Ultimately, he did neither. Instead, he picked up his phone and called Clara. "Get the team together," he said. "It's time to escalate." The following day, a press release went out from Elon's office. It didn't mention Gateswood by name, but its intent was clear. The statement announced the formation of a new venture, Freedom Greens, a revolutionary golf club concept designed to bring the sport into the future. The press release described Freedom Greens as a rejection of the outdated exclusivity that stifles innovation and community. It promised cutting-edge technology, inclusivity, and accessibility, setting itself in direct opposition to everything Gateswood represented. The timing was no coincidence, and everyone, including Whitmore, knew it. As expected, the announcement caused another media firestorm. Some lauded Elon for his bold vision, while others dismissed it as a petty act of revenge. Whitmore issued no response this time, but behind the scenes, Gateswood's PR team scrambled to contain the fallout. The club's reputation was now tied to the feud, and no amount of polite deflection could change that. Meanwhile, Elon threw himself into the project with his characteristic intensity. Late nights were spent sketching designs for the club's facilities, brainstorming technological integrations, and recruiting the best minds in golf and architecture. His vision was clear. Freedom Greens would be a place where innovation met tradition, where anyone, regardless of status or appearance, could play the game. But the stakes were higher than ever. Gateswood wasn't going to sit back and let him succeed without a fight. The anonymous leaks continued, with new allegations surfacing about Elon's behavior during his visit. Social media debates grew more polarized, with supporters and detractors clashing over every detail. The pressure from investors and colleagues increased, some urging him to drop the project entirely. Through it all, Elon remained unfazed. If anything, the escalating conflict only fueled his determination. Gateswood had underestimated him, treating him like an outsider who didn't belong. But they had made a critical error. They had given him something to prove. By the end of the week, the plans for Freedom Greens were well underway. The site for the first location had been selected, a sprawling plot of land just outside Los Angeles, and construction was scheduled to begin within the month. The project was no longer just an idea. It was becoming a reality. As Elon stood on the empty field that would soon transform into the world's most innovative golf club, he looked out at the horizon and smiled. The conflict with Gateswood had started as a personal slight, but it had grown into something much bigger. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about redefining the game, and, perhaps, the very idea of exclusivity itself. The field stretched before Elon Musk, a blank canvas of opportunity. The warm California breeze rustled through the tall grass, carrying with it the faint promise of transformation. Here, on this unassuming stretch of land, the first Freedom Greens would rise. It wouldn't just be a golf course, it would be a statement, a symbol of rebellion against the old-world elitism embodied by Gateswood Golf and Country Club. Standing at the edge of the lot, Elon was joined by Clara, who had become his de facto second-in-command on the project. She adjusted her sunglasses as she studied the landscape, a tablet in hand displaying early renderings of the facility. "We've got the land, the design team, and the engineers ready to go," she said, her tone brisk but tinged with excitement. "Now, all we need is the green light from you." Elon glanced at the tablet, then back at the field. "Make it happen," he said simply, the corner of his mouth curling into a determined smile. The decision marked the official start of Freedom Greens. Construction crews were mobilized within days, and the site became a hive of activity. Surveyors mapped out the terrain while architects and designers finalized the plans. Elon insisted on being involved in every step, from the layout of the courses to the integration of cutting-edge technology. Autonomous golf carts, augmented reality training simulators, and even personalized 3D printed clubs were just a few of the innovations he envisioned. The team worked tirelessly, but the shadow of Gateswood loomed large. As news of the project spread, so did the opposition. Anonymous sources continued to leak inflammatory stories to the press, painting Freedom Greens as a vanity project born out of spite. Social media was ablaze with debates, with critics accusing Elon of using the club as a platform for personal vendettas and political posturing. The red cap became a divisive symbol, appearing in memes and think pieces alike. Despite the noise, Elon remained focused. "Let them talk," he told Clara during one particularly heated planning session. "By the time they figure out what we're building, it'll already be too late to stop us." But the pressure was mounting. Investors in his other ventures began to voice concerns about the distraction Freedom Greens posed. One board member at Tesla even suggested Elon consider stepping back from the project entirely, arguing that it risked damaging his reputation and diverting resources from more critical pursuits. Elon listened to their concerns, but refused to waver. "This isn't just about golf," he explained during a tense meeting with his inner circle. "This is about showing people that the rules they've been told to follow don't have to define them. If we let Gateswood and places like it dictate what's possible, we're letting the past win. I didn't get here by playing it safe, and I'm not about to start now." The turning point came one evening when Clara burst into Elon's office, her face lit with both urgency and triumph. "We've got them," she said, holding up a file. Elon looked up from his desk where he had been sketching ideas for the club's logo. "Got who?" "Gateswood, or more specifically, Gerald Whitmore." She handed him the file, which contained a dossier of information on the club's operations. It turns out their exclusivity isn't just about tradition. They've been quietly rejecting applicants based on more than just dress codes. Income brackets, social circles, even political affiliations. Whitmore's been using the club as a gatekeeping tool to maintain his version of the right kind of membership. Elon flipped through the pages, his expression darkening as he read. "And this is verified?" "Multiple sources," Clara confirmed. "If this gets out, it'll be a PR disaster for them." For a moment, Elon considered his options. The information was a weapon, one that could dismantle Gateswood's reputation and put Whitmore on the defensive. But it also felt like playing their game, stooping to their level. He set the file down and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as he weighed the decision. "Leaking this would be too easy," he said finally. "We don't win by tearing them down. We win by building something better." Clara nodded, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "Then we keep going, but they won't back off either." And they didn't. Gateswood escalated their efforts to discredit Elon, commissioning op-eds in influential publications and enlisting high-profile members to publicly criticize Freedom Greens. One particularly cutting article described Elon's project as a billionaire's playground masquerading as inclusivity, accusing him of using his wealth to bulldoze over established institutions. Elon responded the only way he knew how, by doubling down. He began hosting live Quanda sessions on social media, inviting golf enthusiasts of all backgrounds to share their ideas for the club. The sessions quickly gained traction, with thousands of viewers tuning in to watch Elon discuss everything from course design to the philosophy behind Freedom Greens. "This isn't just a golf course," he said during one particularly passionate live stream. "It's a challenge to the idea that tradition should exclude innovation. Golf should be for everyone, not just the people who can afford to buy their way into a private club." The message resonated. Support for Freedom Greens began to snowball, with prominent figures from both the golf world and beyond voicing their support. Professional golfers expressed interest in playing on the course, while celebrities praised its inclusive vision. Even some former Gateswood members quietly reached out, expressing discontent with the club's outdated policies. Construction on the site progressed at an astonishing pace, thanks in no small part to Elon's characteristic impatience. By the time the main facilities began to take shape, Freedom Greens was already becoming a movement. Merchandise bearing the club's logo, a stylized green infinity symbol, started popping up online, and the hashtag Freedom Greens trended for weeks. But the battle wasn't over. Gateswood's latest move came in the form of a legal challenge, claiming that Freedom Green's location violated zoning laws. It was a transparent attempt to stall progress, and while Elon's legal team was confident they could win, it added yet another layer of tension to an already high-stakes endeavor. Through it all, Elon kept his focus. Standing in the middle of the construction site one evening, surrounded by the skeleton of what would soon be the most advanced golf club in the world, he felt a rare sense of calm. The journey had been fraught with obstacles, but every challenge only reaffirmed his belief in the project. "This isn't just about golf," he said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. "This is about proving that the future belongs to those willing to build it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the site in a golden glow, Elon knew the climax was fast approaching. The time for planning was over. Now it was time to deliver. The sky above Freedom Greens shimmered with a clear blue, unmarred by clouds. Construction crews moved with synchronized precision, their machinery transforming the once empty field into an intricate tapestry of greens, bunkers, and futuristic architecture. At the center of the chaos stood Elon Musk, dressed in his characteristic understated style, a clipboard in hand. His gaze swept over the nearly finished course, each detail a reflection of his vision. Freedom. Greens wasn't just a golf club anymore. It had become a cultural phenomenon. Media outlets from around the globe covered the project, marveling at the sheer audacity of Elon's ambition. But with the attention came mounting pressure. The legal battles with Gateswood escalated, their team throwing every bureaucratic obstacle they could muster to slow the progress. Articles critiquing Elon's project flooded the airwaves, accusing him of being out of touch or using Freedom Greens as a personal vendetta. Yet, for every critic, there were supporters. The hashtag Freedom Greens dominated social media, with stories pouring in from people inspired by Elon's defiance of tradition. Former Gateswood members, disillusioned by the club's elitism, sent private messages of encouragement. Professional golfers reached out, intrigued by the promise of innovation. Despite the opposition, the momentum was undeniable. As the opening day loomed closer, Elon's team worked tirelessly to finalize the details. Clara had become his unwavering partner in the endeavor, managing logistics with military efficiency. Late one evening, she entered Elon's office where he was sketching the final design for the club's launch event. "We need to talk," she said, placing a folder on his desk. Her tone was serious, a sharp contrast to the usual energy she brought to their discussions. Elon looked up curious. "What's in the folder?" Clara hesitated before speaking. "It's Whitmore. We've uncovered more about how Gateswood operates. Their entire system is built on exclusivity, sure, but it's worse than we thought. They've been blacklisting people based on political affiliations, personal connections, even ethnicity in some cases. It's all buried in their application rejections." Elon's expression darkened as he opened the folder. Inside were documents, testimonies, and emails that painted a damning picture of Gateswood's operations. It wasn't just about tradition, it was systemic exclusion, meticulously maintained under the guise of prestige. "This could destroy them," Clara said. "If we release this, Whitmore's empire crumbles. Gateswood's reputation will never recover." Elon stared at the papers, his mind racing. It was the ultimate weapon, one that could end the feud with a single strike. But as tempting as it was, something didn't sit right. Using this information felt reactive, a move that contradicted everything Freedom Greens stood for. "We're not doing it," he said finally, closing the folder. "Freedom Greens isn't about tearing others down. It's about building something better." Clara nodded, though she still looked concerned. "You know they won't stop, right? Whitmore's not the type to admit defeat." Elon leaned back in his chair, a small smile forming. "Then we give him a show he can't ignore." The idea for the grand opening had always been ambitious, but now it became something more, a declaration. Elon envisioned an event that would not just showcase Freedom Greens, but redefine what a golf club could be. Invitations were sent to professional golfers, celebrities, and even regular people who had shared their stories online. The guest list was as diverse as the club's mission. The day of the opening arrived with all the fanfare of a major sporting event. Media vans lined the roads leading to the club, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Drones hovered above the course, capturing aerial shots of the sprawling greens and state-of-the-art facilities. The entrance, flanked by sleek sculptures of spiraling greens, bore a massive banner with the club's motto, "Where innovation meets everyone." As the guests began to arrive, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Clara orchestrated the logistics like a conductor leading an orchestra, ensuring every detail was perfect. Elon, meanwhile, prepared for the moment he knew would define the event. The centerpiece of the opening was a press conference held on the club's main terrace, overlooking the first tee. Elon stepped up to the podium, his red cap perched firmly on his head. The crowd hushed as cameras zoomed in, every lens trained on him. "Welcome to Freedom Greens," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "This isn't just a golf club. It's a challenge to the idea that tradition should exclude innovation. It's a place where anyone, no matter who they are or where they come from, can play the game." He paused, scanning the crowd. "I didn't build Freedom Greens because Gateswood rejected me. I built it because Gateswood represents a system that tells people they don't belong. And I think it's time we said no to that system." The crowd erupted into applause, but Elon wasn't finished. "But this isn't about me," he continued. "It's about you. It's about the people who told their stories, who believed in a different vision for what golf and community could be." He gestured toward the course behind him. "This is just the beginning. Freedom Greens isn't a club. It's a movement." As the applause swelled again, Elon stepped back, letting the moment sink in. The cameras captured every second, the image of him standing there, red cap and all, becoming an instant symbol of defiance and progress. But the real climax came later, during the inaugural game. Elon had invited several professional golfers to join him for the first round, but he insisted on starting the game himself. As he stepped up to the tee, the crowd fell silent. Holding a custom-designed club, he adjusted his cap and took his stance. The swing was clean, the ball soaring through the air and landing perfectly on the fairway. The crowd erupted into cheers, the moment broadcast live to millions around the world. Back at Gateswood, Gerald Whitmore watched the broadcast in silence. His face was a mask of controlled anger as the reality of what had just happened set in. Freedom. Greens wasn't just a golf club, it was a direct challenge to everything Gateswood stood for. And it was winning. The climax wasn't just about Elon's triumph, it was about the shift in the narrative. Freedom Greens had become a symbol of change, a testament to the power of innovation and inclusivity. And as the sun set over the course, Elon knew the hardest battles were behind him. The future, bright and boundless, lay ahead. The days following the grand opening of Freedom Greens were a whirlwind of media coverage, social media virality, and public discourse. Images of Elon Musk standing on the main terrace, red cap angled slightly forward, became an instant cultural touchstone. Clips of his speech circulated online with pundits analyzing every word. But the real impact wasn't just in the coverage, it was in the way people responded. Freedom Greens wasn't just a golf club anymore. It had become a symbol, a rallying point for those who had felt excluded from spaces designed to cater to the elite. Membership applications flooded in, not just from golf enthusiasts but from people who had never touched a club in their lives. The tagline, "Where innovation meets everyone," resonated far beyond the sport. Meanwhile, at Gateswood Golf and Country Club, the atmosphere was anything but celebratory. The morning after the Freedom Greens launch, Gerald Whitmore sat in his office, the television in the corner, playing a news segment about the event. The anchor's voice was laced with barely concealed admiration as they described the club's state-of-the-art facilities, its groundbreaking technology, and its inclusive ethos. Freedom Greens has redefined what a golf club can be, the anchor said as the screen showed drone footage of the futuristic greens. And, in doing so, it has challenged the traditional models of exclusivity that have long dominated the sport. Whitmore muted the television, his jaw tightening. The footage cut too close to home. The comparisons between his club and Freedom Greens weren't just unflattering, they were damning. For years, Gateswood had thrived on its image of exclusivity, its carefully cultivated reputation as the pinnacle of sophistication. But now, that image was cracking. The cracks widened that afternoon when Whitmore received an urgent call from one of Gateswood's longest-standing members. "This is unacceptable, Gerald," the voice on the other end barked. "Do you have any idea how bad this makes us look? The press is all over this Freedom Greens nonsense, and now they're digging into Gateswood's policies. I've already had 2 reporters call me this morning asking about your admissions process." Whitmore tried to placate the man, but it was no use. The calls kept coming, each one echoing the same concerns. By evening, it was clear that Gateswood was facing a full-blown crisis. The documents Clara had shown Elon, detailing the club's discriminatory practices, hadn't been leaked, but the scrutiny surrounding Gateswood had brought those issues to the surface. Journalists began to investigate, piecing together a pattern of exclusivity that went far beyond dress codes and etiquette. Elon, watching from a distance, saw the fallout unfold with a mix of satisfaction and vindication. He had chosen not to release the documents himself, but he didn't need to. The sheer audacity of Freedom Green's success had put a spotlight on Gateswood, exposing the very flaws it had tried to hide. Clara entered his office one afternoon, holding a tablet. "You've seen the news?" she asked. Elon nodded. "They're imploding faster than I expected." "They've started losing members," Clara continued, scrolling through a report. "Some of the big names are already jumping ship. Apparently, they don't want to be associated with a club that's getting labeled as outdated and exclusionary." Elon leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Good. Let them see what happens when you cling to the past instead of embracing the future. But it wasn't just Gateswood's membership that was dwindling. Sponsors and corporate partners who had long supported the club began to pull their endorsements, unwilling to be linked to the growing scandal. The media coverage intensified, with investigative reports uncovering more about Gateswood's practices. The once unassailable fortress of exclusivity was crumbling, and Whitmore could do little to stop it. In the weeks that followed, Freedom Greens continued to thrive. The first tournament held at the club was a resounding success, attracting both professional players and casual golfers who marveled at the course's cutting-edge features. Elon's decision to integrate augmented reality into the game, a feature that allowed players to analyze their swings in real time and visualize different shot trajectories, became a particular highlight. The technology wasn't just innovative, it was transformative, making the game more accessible to newcomers while challenging seasoned players to improve. But for Elon, the true triumph wasn't in the technology or the accolades. It was in the stories he heard from the people who came to Freedom Greens. There was the single mother who brought her 2 teenage sons to play their first round of golf, marveling at how the club made them feel welcome. There was the retired teacher who had always loved the game but had been priced out of traditional courses, now able to play again without worrying about the cost. These stories were what made the project worth it. One afternoon, as Elon strolled along the course, he was approached by a young man in his early 20s. The man hesitated before speaking, clearly nervous. "Mr. Musk," he said, "I just wanted to say thank you. I've always loved golf, but I never felt like I belonged at places like Gateswood. This feels different, like it's actually for people like me." Elon smiled, clapping the young man on the shoulder. "It is," he said simply, "and it always will be." The moment stayed with him as he returned to his office later that day. Sitting at his desk, he pulled out the red cap that had started it all, turning it over in his hands. It was frayed now, worn from use, but it remained a symbol of everything Freedom Greens stood for: defiance, innovation, and the belief that the future should belong to everyone. As the sun set over the course, Elon placed the cap on the corner of his desk, where it caught the last rays of light. The fight with Gateswood had been about more than a golf club. It had been about challenging the idea that progress must bow to tradition, that power must always rest in the hands of the few. And in that fight, Elon had done more than win. He had changed the game. Back at Gateswood, Whitmore sat alone in his office, the weight of the club's decline pressing down on him. The phone calls had stopped, but not because the crisis was over. The members who had once filled Gateswood's halls had moved on, many of them finding a new home at Freedom Greens. The legacy Whitmore had spent decades building was unraveling, and for the first time he found himself questioning the choices that had brought him here. Meanwhile, at Freedom Greens, the lights of the clubhouse glowed warmly against the evening sky. Guests laughed and chatted, their voices carrying across the greens. It was a place alive with possibility, a testament to what could be achieved when boundaries were broken and traditions reimagined. And at the heart of it all was Elon Musk, a man who had refused to back down, who had faced prejudice and opposition with determination and vision. He had taken the red cap that others had used to judge him and turned it into a banner of change. The game had changed, and so had the world. The glow of Freedom Greens stretched far into the night, a beacon of possibility that illuminated the California hills. Months had passed since the grand opening, and the club's success continued to ripple through the world of golf and beyond. What had started as a reaction to a moment of exclusion had grown into a cultural shift, reshaping not just the sport, but the way people thought about exclusivity, innovation, and community. Elon Musk stood on the terrace of the clubhouse, watching the final players of the day finish their rounds. The scene before him was a testament to the club's mission. Families laughing together as they practiced their swings, young professionals networking between holes, and even a group of teenagers testing the club's augmented reality features on the driving range. Freedom Greens had become more than just a golf course. It was a meeting place, a space where people from all walks of life could connect. The sound of footsteps pulled Elon from his thoughts. Clara approached, a tablet in hand as always, though her expression was more relaxed than usual. "It's official," she said, holding up the screen. "We've just surpassed 1 million visitors, and the online membership program, over 200,000 active users." Elon smiled, nodding slightly. "Not bad for a club that didn't exist a year ago." "Not bad at all," Clara agreed. She hesitated before continuing. "There's something else. Whitmore reached out." Elon raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Whitmore? Gerald Whitmore?" Clara nodded. "He wants to meet. Apparently, things at Gateswood have gone from bad to worse. Membership's down 70%, sponsors are pulling out, and there's talk of the board forcing him to step down." Elon leaned against the railing, his expression thoughtful. "And what does he want from me?" "He didn't say," Clara replied, "but my guess is he's looking for a way to save face. Maybe even a partnership." Elon chuckled softly, shaking his head. "A partnership? After everything? That's rich." Clara didn't respond, but her silence spoke volumes. She was leaving the decision to him, trusting his instincts as she always had. After a long pause, Elon straightened and turned to her. "Set up the meeting. Let's see what he has to say." The meeting took place a week later in a neutral location, a private room in a luxury hotel downtown. Whitmore arrived early, his tailored suit immaculate, but his demeanor subdued. The man who had once exuded unshakable confidence now seemed weighed down by the consequences of his choices. When Elon entered the room, he did so with his usual understated style. Dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, he carried no briefcase, no documents, just himself. Whitmore rose to greet him, extending a hand that Elon shook briefly before taking a seat across the table. "Thank you for meeting with me," Whitmore began, his tone measured. "I know we've had our differences." Elon tilted his head slightly, his gaze steady. "That's one way to put it." Whitmore sighed, leaning forward. "Look, I'll be honest. Gateswood is in trouble. Membership is declining faster than we can manage, and the negative press has been relentless. We've tried to adapt, but, well, it's clear we've fallen behind." Elon said nothing, letting the silence stretch. Whitmore shifted uncomfortably before continuing. "I'm here because I believe there's an opportunity for us to work together. Gateswood still has resources, history, and infrastructure. With your vision and leadership, I think we could create something truly extraordinary." Elon studied him for a long moment before responding. "You want me to bail you out?" Whitmore's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "I'm asking for a partnership, for a chance to rebuild." Elon leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Why should I? Gateswood made it clear I didn't belong, and when I tried to build something better, you fought me every step of the way." Whitmore's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of his mistakes evident. "Because Gateswood still has potential. Because you've already shown the world what's possible when tradition meets innovation. Together, we could expand that vision." The room fell silent again, the tension thick. Elon tapped his fingers lightly on the table, considering his next words. "I didn't build Freedom Greens to destroy Gateswood," he said finally. "I built it to show that things could be different. But you and your club fought tooth and nail to stop that change. You only want this partnership because you have no other choice." Whitmore flinched but didn't argue. Elon stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I'll think about it," he said, though his tone made it clear he wasn't making any promises. "But if we do this, it'll be on my terms." Whitmore nodded, his expression resigned. "I understand. Thank you for your time." Over the next few weeks, Elon weighed the decision carefully. The idea of partnering with Gateswood was fraught with complications, but it also presented an opportunity to further dismantle the barriers that had defined the old system. In the end, he decided to take the risk, not for Whitmore's sake, but for the chance to reshape Gateswood into something that aligned with Freedom Green's values. The partnership announcement was met with a mix of surprise and skepticism, but Elon's vision quickly became clear. Gateswood underwent a complete transformation, shedding its exclusivity in favor of inclusivity. Membership fees were restructured to make the club accessible, and new programs were introduced to attract a broader audience. The changes weren't easy, and there was resistance from some of the remaining members, but Elon's reputation and determination carried the initiative forward. By the time the first joint tournament was held at Gateswood, the club was nearly unrecognizable. The event was a celebration of progress, with players from all backgrounds competing side by side. Elon attended, of course, wearing the same red cap that had sparked the feud in the first place. Whitmore was also there, though his role was far more subdued. He had stepped down as president, handing the reins to a younger, more forward-thinking leader. As Elon watched the tournament unfold, he felt a rare sense of closure. The journey that had begun with a simple act of exclusion had led to a transformation that few could have imagined. Gateswood, once a symbol of elitism, was now a part of the movement it had tried to suppress. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elon returned to Freedom Greens. Standing on the terrace of the clubhouse, he looked out over the course, its greens glowing softly in the twilight. He thought about the path that had brought him here, the challenges, the conflicts, the moments of doubt, and felt a quiet pride in what he had accomplished. The world wasn't perfect, but it was changing, and for Elon Musk, that was enough. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. If this story resonated with you, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss more captivating tales we share here. Take a moment to explore our other videos. Each one has a unique story to tell, just waiting for you to discover it. And don't keep this to yourself. Share this video with friends, family, or anyone who loves thought-provoking narratives. Together, let's keep these stories alive and growing.